He currently works with Worldwide Technologies, but I know you've got a ton of other experience and some pretty cool insight you're going to give us. So I never do it justice, so I'll just let you talk about yourself, and then we'll go from there. Thanks for joining us.
That sounds great. It's great to be here. It's fun to see. You guys look way younger than most of the people in the glowing rectangles on my screen when I'm doing video conferences these days. So it's going to be fun to have this audience. If you would, have you turned on my screen sharing? Justin, if you would let me share, and I can start up a presentation. Hey, now I'm cool. Sweet. All right. Share that. And you guys should see a screen now that says Clayton Catalyst on it. You guys got that? Okay, cool. All right, well, it's great to be here. And, I've prepared some stuff to share with you based on my experience, stuff like that. And then also want to hear from some of you as well as we go through this. So, first of all, just to introduce who I am. Again, my name is Matt Coble, and I've spent, most of my career helping companies build big, complicated websites and mobile applications and stuff like that. So I work with technology people, software developers who write the code to make things like that happen, the visual designers who are, designing the things that we use on our mobile phones and on the web and stuff like that, and all the different types of people it takes to do that kind of work. So it's been super fun to, do that as the internet, has become a thing that's just part of how our everyday lives work. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that stuff that you all may have as we go along. And for those of you who are from Clayton High School, you may know Nell Coble. I'm her dad, so it's good to be here. The first thing I wanted to do is kind of ask a few of you to just tell me, like, during this program, what kinds of things are you working on? What are y'all doing? And Justin, maybe I'll throw it to you first to just give me an update on that, and then tell me what you guys, and then maybe some others can jump in and tell me kind of where are you in the program, what kind of stuff are you working on, and that way, by understanding that a little bit, I can sort of maybe weave some of that into some of the things I'm talking about today.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, students kind of began working on their passion projects. So a lot of them are developing, in the process of developing, or have developed a business idea. And so a lot of them are building out, whether it's social media presence, prototypes. A lot of them are designing websites, which is why I thought you'd be an awesome person to connect with them today. So if anyone out there is working on something that they're designing, again, prototype or website or even an app, I'm sure Mr. Coble would love to hear your idea. And so go ahead and come off mute and talk for a second. Don't everyone go at the same time. You guys pace yourselves.
Anybody?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Anthony. Currently, I'm not building anything right now, but currently I have an idea that I am trying to expand as much. It is a streaming service app called S3, a streaming service hub that I'm trying to get through. Basically, this app would combine all streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and multiple other streaming services into one platform to make it easier for people to navigate through the streaming services that they own, get new streaming services to subscribe to, and find movies and TV shows much easier than they would if they had to separately navigate each streaming service app. Basically, my main agenda for this is to make it easier for people to find the stuff they want to watch, and two, so that to combine all streaming services together in one as its own TV form.
Cool. That's a very interesting idea. And let me also explain, as I'm looking over there, I've got your faces on this monitor, and this is where my presentation is. But your idea there is interesting to me. I'm quite frankly, I'm a little bit annoyed with like Hollywood and the entertainment industry, that everybody's now like, oh, Disney's got a streaming service, and now NBC has one called Peacock, and HBO Max, and this and that, because it's getting complicated for us to find stuff we want to watch and to figure out like, you know, what movies on what thing that I can stream on my TV now. Is it on Amazon Prime or Netflix or, you know, Hulu or something else? So I think that is definitely a problem that we're facing as consumers, and all of these companies continue to make more and more streaming services. So it'd be interesting to see how that turns out for you. So thanks for sharing that. All right, well, I want to jump ahead here, and I'm going to start. You're going to see I like to work with a lot of pictures in the work that I do. So curious if you have any thoughts about like what's going on here. What do you see? What's going on? Anybody? And I'm thinking about like, you've got this pathway with those metal gates, but then on the right, you've got this trail. Okay, well, so to me, this is a sort of an interesting way to think about, you know, something I think about a lot in the work that I do is, you know, what we call experience design, right? And so you can think of sort of creative design or visual design as like colors and fonts and typography, and so the photography of things and so forth. Then there's software design and so the technical design of things, but kind of in between the two, often, you know, in the digital world that I live in, we'll talk about how people design experiences. And, you know, often we're thinking about like, where do things go on the screen? Like you can probably see that I've got, you know, buttons on the top and little thumbnails on the left and the big, you know. So some of experience design is thinking about the structure and the layout of where things go in a computer interface or digital interface. But it's also important to me for us to think about experience design in terms of how we move through the world as humans, right? And so here, you know, the people who designed this path, this bike path, right? They wanted to prevent cars, motorcycles, and other vehicles from coming through here, right? So they put these two gates up with the idea that, you know, cars can't come through, but people on bikes or people walking could. But as you can see, bikes don't want to slow down for that, so they go around, right? So on the right, you see a trail of their experience, the experience they want to have. So they want to keep going fast. They want to keep moving. So they've kind of cut this little trail in to the right in this image. And you can also see, you know, the pavement is a little bit worn and lighter going through the gate. And I guarantee you that's the people who are walking, because the people who walk are okay kind of doing that little swivel through there. But if you're on your bike, you don't want to stop and try to figure out how to slow down and go through that, or get off your bike and sweep into there. So that to me is a good example of, you know, seeing what experience design looks like out in the real world, and thinking about, you know, how the ways that we want to do the things that we want to do also kind of depend on our context, right? If I'm on a bike, I'm going to swing out there to the right. If I'm walking, I'm going to be okay, stay on the path and go in the middle. If it's super and rainy and muddy, you know, I might change my context too. So in that case, on my bike, I may actually get off and go through the gates here so I don't get too wet or I don't slip on the side. So, you know, thinking about what people are thinking about, how people are feeling, you know, those are things that are really important when we think about experience design and creating the digital things that we consume right out into the world. So, you know, that's introducing this idea of experience design. And I'm curious if any of you have thoughts about, you know, experience design that you see and the things that you use. And it could be like something you see that you like or don't like in an app like Snapchat or Instagram or something like that. It could be, you know, a place you go, a store, or somewhere out in the world. It could be something you notice in your school about like, hey, Lane, how come it's designed like this? Does anybody have any thoughts about experience design stuff that you see out in the world?
Man, you guys are allowed to talk. I don't know why they're so quiet today. I don't know what they're all took their Valium this morning or something. But feel free to type it in the chat too. Let me maybe pose it a different way, because this might put it in perspective. Is there a social media platform recently that maybe ran an update that changed the way it looks and you like it or you don't like it? Maybe share some thoughts.
Yep, that's a good example for sure. Well, and I'll share with you as well, you know, part of the experience design we're all having these days is doing stuff on Zoom and other video conferencing tools. And one thing I have definitely noticed is that if there are more than like 4 or 5 people on a lot of these video conferences, like in the work that I'm doing, and I'm on them a lot all day, every day. It's real hard to get people to talk to each other. It's interesting to me to compare like 8 or 10 people in a meeting room versus 8 or 10 people on a video conference. The meeting room group of people has an easier time talking with one another than we do with video conferencing. So I see a couple of things in the chat. Instagram shopping. Oh, the Instagram update was horrible, says Chase. Very good. Why was it horrible? Can you comment on, what about it you didn't like?
They made it into like a shopping platform.
Yeah. And so you find it sort of annoying that it's more now about shopping than it is, that kind of what it was previously. Is that what you're saying?
I also noticed that they sort of have been copying other social media stuff when they come out. Like they made Instagram stories a couple years ago, which was basically like Snapchat, and then they just added Reels, which is very similar to TikTok.
Yep. Totally agree. And that's, a great observation. As you likely know, Instagram is owned by Facebook, and Facebook over the years has been pretty notorious about either finding a company that they think is interesting and buy it, and then like they bought Instagram and then becomes part of Facebook, or they see something out there that they like and then they just copy it, like you're saying, and don't always necessarily give the credit to the company that originated the idea. So at one point, as you may know, Facebook tried to buy Snapchat, and Snapchat said nope, and so they kind of copied that and have replicated a lot of Snapchat's functionality into Instagram, Facebook, and other things too. Well, those are good examples. So somebody also commented Disney Plus. So what do you like or not like about Disney Plus from an experience design standpoint?
So I don't. So Disney Plus is one of the apps that I just hate how I just hate the platform and how basically the presentation of the main content on the screen. Like if you basically go to it, it's just clustered. I hate how I hate how they categorize everything. I hate the search bar, and I think they really need to do updates on their design on their mainframe.
Yeah, that's good stuff too. Well, I want to pull up a couple, examples here of real world experience design things that we can kind of think about, and then we'll sort of connect this in some more to technology or to digital stuff. So, all right. So first of all, some examples of some bad experience design out in the world that you might see. So, upper left, you got your tomato, ketchup, your mustard, and whoever at Heinz was designing the product packaging forgot to turn the label upside down from what it was previously. So now if you put these together with each other, relish is kind of upside down now, right? And I imagine that they may have fixed that, but that's something you can see out in the world. Another thing that I like to point out to people, the upper right image here is for garage doors, right? And that is, those have handles on them. And, I'd sort of like to think that if you kind of pull those handles, that those doors would magically open and ponies would come out or something, but that's not going to happen. They don't even work. They're just stuck on there. I mean, they look pretty, but they don't do anything. So to me, that's sort of like, what's the point, right? Because if I push the garage door button, that whole thing's going to go like that. And those handles do nothing ever. Probably you figured out the elevator stuff on the lower left, right? You've got buttons with the numbers on them, and you've got numbers next to the buttons with the numbers on them. Why is that a good idea? Nobody needs that. Just either there should be the numbers next to the button, or better, the number on the button, so you know what you're pushing when you're pushing the thing. And then the right is also something I see all the time out in the world. Is, if a door has a handle that you can hold in your hand, you pull it. Okay, that's how those doors should work. So if you put a push sign on a door with a handle, the better thing to do would have been just take the handles off, because if there's no handle, all you can do is push the door to get into that space. So those are just some examples of some experience design fails out in the world. that you can see. And, you know, since that's part of what I do for a living, is sort of thinking about how we experience things intellectually and emotionally. And I'm looking for stuff like this all the time, often to the dismay of my family, because I'll be pointing something out like this on the world and like, dude, dad, can we just go? Like, come on, right? But it's a fun thing to do. So can y'all think of any other kind of things like this that you see in the world you think like, yeah, that's not quite right? Has anybody got a garage door with handles on it? All right, well, let's keep going. Another example of this, which then moves more into the digital space, right, which is kind of the space I live in, was a product that came out a few years ago now called Juiceroo. And the idea is it's kind of a blender, right? So you put fruit in and you make smoothies and stuff like that. Well, the Juiceroo here, you can see kind of on the right, it's just made something. You know, it had a very pretty mobile app, right? You can see here on the left, right? It would, you know, connect with Bluetooth or over your wireless network, and had different recipes in it and stuff like that. And so the mobile app was designed to help you kind of make amazing smoothies. Well, the problem was the blender itself had no buttons on it. So the mobile app was the only way to make a smoothie or to make any kind of drink you might want to make with the blender. And when they launched the product, the mobile app and the blender never really worked right together, so they never really connected. So people spent a couple $100, I think, on this thing, which never actually really worked, and the company pretty quickly went out of business. And, you know, if you think about it now, it looks pretty, right? It's a very elegant thing on the right. The mobile app looks very nicely designed. But to me, this is a good example of kind of experience design. So taking a very visual design to a level that is really unnecessary, because most of the time, if you're making a smoothie, you're at the blender, right? So you don't have to, you know, if you're putting the stuff in the blender right here, like, where's my phone so I can turn this blender on, right? Just you push the button on the blender. It's right there in front of you, right? You know, we also at our house, we recently got a new washing machine for our laundry that also has a mobile app and stuff like that. And to me, it's just sort of ridiculous, because I'm doing laundry, I'm at the machine, I'm standing right there, the buttons are right in front of me. You know, why would I need to necessarily look at the mobile app to make that thing work? So anyway, to me, these are just some examples to share with you about, you know, how people experience the world, both in physical spaces, you know, and products we use and so forth, as well as with the digital experiences that we enjoy, and to really think through kind of what's that experience design principle that we should have in mind as we use these things. So moving ahead from my next photo, go ahead in the chat or say out loud if you would, where's this? Anybody know where this is?
McDonald's.
No, not McDonald's. Surely at least a couple of you have been to here, right?
Starbucks.
Nothing? What's that?
Starbucks.
Yes, Starbucks. Everybody recognize that as Starbucks, pretty much? I mean, like a thumbs up, yeah. So how do you know this is Starbucks? There's no sign. It doesn't say Starbucks anywhere.
That's Tim Hortons.
There's coffee on like in the front.
Yep. There's coffee, absolutely. And I imagine that if you've been to Starbucks enough, you know, you would kind of get every Starbucks has sort of a similar vibe, right? And so the stuff that's going on here is kind of giving you that whole Starbucks experience, okay? So does anybody know which Starbucks this happens to be?
The Brentwood one.
It does look like the Brentwood one, but it's not.
It looks like the Tim Hortons in Maplewood.
It also looks like the one in Maplewood. I would agree with that. I've been to both of those that you're talking about. As it turns out, this one happens to be in Ferguson, Missouri, right? And I'm not sure exactly where it is. I just know because when I got the photo of it to prepare for this today, that's where the article talked about it being from. And I guess my point in sort of asking you where it is that it kind of doesn't matter, right? That the experience of a Starbucks isn't always identical, but it's always similar and feels the same. So really this Starbucks could be any Starbucks around the country, around the world. And when we walk in, because they've thought about the experience design of how the tables look, how the coffee's displayed, how the woodwork is done, what the colors are, you see green, you see brown, you see tan, right? All of that was very thoughtful on the part of the interior designers of Starbucks, so that if we go to any Starbucks around the world, it sort of feels like the same space, right? And importantly, in creating that good experience design and sort of helping us, feel the right emotions and the right sort of intellectual drivers around how we enjoy Starbucks, that extends into the Starbucks mobile app, right? So if we look at the digital experience of Starbucks, right, which I imagine at least some of you have used or seen, I'm putting these on top of each other because you can see here that even in the mobile app, you think, well, that's digital, and this you're talking about a store that's like furniture and stuff. Well, but if you look closely, they look kind of the same, right? Because you have green colors going on, like the green wall in the background in the actual store. You've got some tan happening in the star in the middle and that meter that's going across, which is kind of like the tan of the table or the tan of the basket in the background there. And of course, you've got some browns going on because coffee is brown and black and kind of that color palette. And so the architecture and the design of the stores often uses that sort of brown and tan feel of coffee, and as does, the presentation of that stuff in the mobile app. So the visual designers of the Starbucks mobile app, really thought carefully about not just how should it work and what's the flow of things, how do you pick out what you want, how do you order and all that kind of stuff, but thought about the structure of that and the visual design of that so that it matches the store. So it matches that store experience so that if I'm coming into the app, I'm going into the store, the experience design, the feeling I get, how it looks and how it feels stays very much the same. So as you guys think about the projects that you are doing, I think it's important to kind of keep in mind, like, what is that experience that you want to deliver to people? How should they feel when they're using your website, your app, or your product, whatever you may be coming up with? How does it look? How does it feel? How does it work? And what behaviors do you want people to have as they use it? Any questions about that? Open to questions from the adults too, if you want to sort of ask me some things that connected into some of the stuff y'all are doing.
Yeah, I had actually had a question. And with your experience, you're talking about like the interior designer and the person that's doing the digital platform. How much communication do those people have with one another, or the teams? Do they collaborate a lot with one another, or is it just kind of done, separately, and then they kind of assess it at the end?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's a great question. In my experience, it's often the case that companies like Starbucks and others that really care deeply about their brand, so you think about Coca-Cola or Starbucks or some of the car companies, particularly the higher end car companies, they will often produce what they broadly refer to as style guides, right, which are documentation. Often if you look up if you go out into Google and say Starbucks style guide, you probably would find something there for them. And those are often ways to just kind of capture the documentation of, here's how things should look. Here's the colors we use. Here's the fonts we use, the typography we use. Here's photography that sort of properly represents, how our brand works and looks and feels. And so whether you're designing a store or whether you're designing a mobile app, a website, new presentation or whatever at a company like this, companies that do this well will position those style guides so that anybody doing anything that might have to connect to the visual system of the brand knows to go to that style guide and check that out and make sure that the work they're doing kind of connects back to that common point of view around visual design, experience design, and so forth. And there are a lot of companies that don't do that well at all, and you can sort of feel that, sometimes if you kind of use their technology and check out the website versus go into a store, and it's like, well, these don't match. This is kind of weird. And we don't always sort of consciously feel that, but I guarantee you we have kind of a subconscious vibe around that. And it's very much evident when, I can pull up this image and most of us just know with really no clear signage that, oh, look, it's a Starbucks, right? So any other questions about that? Okay. Well, the next thing I wanted to touch in was, thinking about the technologies that it takes to do things like, the stuff that that I work on. And, when earlier one of you was sharing that you're thinking about kind of this in a way to integrate all of the streaming platforms into a common technical footprint. And, that would be technically very complicated. But from an experience design standpoint, in the end, if you don't make it easy for me to find just the right thing I want to watch, the complexity of that technology is not going to matter all that much. So for the first step here, I'm curious if anybody knows what that is. And I'm guessing not. The remaining people that have video turned on, I see a couple curious faces and a ceiling. So, so that is the inside of this clock right here. And the reason I share that is because, while it is the case that there's a ton of complex technology that makes stuff like Instagram and Snapchat and Starbucks and all of those things work, when the technology works extraordinarily well, it really should ultimately have a pretty simple experience that you enjoy, right? So here, if we look at kind of all of that complexity of the clockworks and their weights that pull down and there's things that chime and, all of the gears and everything that's going on in there, that's the technology engine of a grandfather clock. But most of us really don't care. And I don't think we need to care as long as, we can glance over and look at the face and say, oh, look, it's, 11:20, cool, right? Or at the top of the hour, the chime chimes and we can sort of hear upstairs like, oh, I guess it must be coming up on 2:30. So as you think about the, projects that you're doing, it's often the case, I'll work with different teams of people who are, very proud of the technology that they're creating. And they absolutely should be proud of that because it's really complicated. It's hard work to write software, to, build websites, build mobile applications, make streaming services work and all the things that we're doing. So technically that stuff is super complicated and the teams doing it should be proud of it. But in the end, for those of us who are using it, it needs to be really easy and simple. And all that stuff going on, in the back of the clock that's spinning around to make the hands be in the right spot, we don't care. It just needs to work. If it doesn't, we're kind of annoyed, right? So encourage you as you think about the things that you're pursuing, you're building, what's the very simple way to present it to the people who are using it? And how do you kind of hide all the complexity of the technology or whatever else may need to be going on behind the scenes to actually make it work? Any questions about that? Okay. Well, I've got a couple more thoughts to share, and then I might, show a movie, because what kind of guest appearance in a classroom would be right without showing a little bit of video? All right. Okay. So the last couple of things I want to talk about are, this guy and this guy. Okay. So this guy is from like 1972. Okay. He's looking off into the future, kind of out that way or whatever direction that is. And, as I think about kind of where we are, and I've seen in my life this sort of movement into kind of the rise of the internet, the amount of attention that he had to give to different things during the course of his day, particularly kind of media, was not very much, right? Sometimes he might read a newspaper, he might hear a radio, he might watch TV at night. And, back at that time, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was sort of a small set of channels that this person could watch to see what was going out there. So the amount of attention that he could spend on a given kind of media was, a fair amount. And so that's sort of one aspect of kind of his media attention. The next piece of kind of this person's life, back then, is that the number of communities that he could be a part of is kind of small and was sort of bounded by geography, right? So, he might belong to, he has his family, he might belong to, a church or a club, he might be on a team in his community, and all of the communities he could be a part of were, had to be kind of close by where he was for him to get there to be part of that community, right? So the number of media moments this guy could have in a day was pretty small. It was kind of the same set of media moments that other people in his community would have. The number of groups or communities he could be involved in, in his life, also kind of small and kind of connected to wherever he happened to live. So that's what his life experience was like. We skip forward to a similar young man today, right? And he's looking out into the future in this other direction. If you think for a moment about the amount of media moments or kind of, instances of something kind of capturing his attention during the day, it's like orders of magnitude more than the guy we were seeing in the former slide, right? Like I guarantee all of us on this video conference right now, I'm sure I've gotten email. I'm sure there's new stuff in my Instagram feed. I'm sure somebody's probably looked at some stuff on my LinkedIn profile. There may be some stuff going on Twitter. I've got stereo equipment over, Sonos equipment over here that I can listen to any radio station on the planet if I want to right now. The TV over there can let me watch pretty much any piece of content I might want to watch on the planet, right? So the amount of media that I can connect to every day is massive. Same thing with this guy. And it's almost an overwhelming onslaught of stuff. Like I don't at all envy, many of you and all of the stuff that you have to keep up with text and Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, all the things that you're involved in, because it takes a lot of time and attention, right? It can be very draining. The other thing I think that's interesting about this guy today, from kind of, again, tying it back to that experience design point of view, is that, the number of communities or groups he can be a part of is really kind of unlimited, right? So think about your own lives, and I'm sure many of you are, playing Fortnite with a different crew of people, and maybe Rocket League with another group of people, and you've got groups at school, you've still got teams, you've still got local communities or perhaps churches and things like that you're part of. So some of those are connected to your geography, but it doesn't have to be anymore, right? You can also join a group of people, playing a game or working on a project or what have you, really anywhere across the world. And that's even more so the case now that, with stuff like Zoom and other video conferencing tools, we can engage with people anywhere on the planet, right? Which is at once kind of awesome that it's unlimited like that, but also can be a little bit overwhelming. So all of that, kind of bringing that back around, a big challenge that we have in the world today as we're creating new products, new technologies, new platforms, is, you got to capture people's attention and get them to join your community in a world in which the amount of attention you can get is tiny, and the number of other options people have other than whatever you're building is almost infinite, right? So if you keep that kind of mindset of people in mind as you're kind of thinking about, your startup ideas, your entrepreneurship ideas, product ideas you may have, I think it's really important to kind of take the point of view of, people like this and think about, like, how do I capture this person's attention? How do I address something that they really want or need? How do I connect with them emotionally with this thing that I'm making, so that I can be part of that media diet that they have running all day, and be part of the set of communities that they're choosing to join, because they could really choose any community they might want to. So that's kind of that end of that segment. I'm curious if y'all have any questions about that, or any reactions to, thinking about how this may fit into what you're working on.
I have a question. What do you think about how much time should you spend on one? I mean, should you spread your time over all the different experiences, or should you try to focus in a business? Because you get sidetracked. Do we go to Instagram? Do we go to Facebook? Do we use our website, or do we develop an app? Can you give the kids some direction on maybe how they can spend their time?
And so just to play that back to make sure I'm understanding probably. So it's like, as I'm building a product or thinking about going to market with something, which of those channels do I use? Do I use as many as I can, or do I focus? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yes, like where do you focus first? Where do you start? And I know that, we know social media is so important, and
Sure.
how do we tell the kids, like, you need to use your time wisely in this category, or so
Right.
yeah, answering the question that.
Right. So I think, for a given, if you're thinking about that from a product development standpoint, so I'm making a thing that I want to kind of put in the marketplace. And so should that be a website or a mobile app, or, how do I kind of put that out into the world? So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it I think about is, how do I market this thing that I'm thinking about? Like, how do I kind of make people aware of it? And in both cases, if you keep in mind that, the people that you're probably trying to reach as your customer are super busy, fully saturated with media all day, every day, kind of can join whatever community they may want or group, right? They're super busy. The real trick, in my view, is to figure out, where, if you take that person, that customer's point of view, where is that person most likely to be comfortable with hearing from you, right? So and that could be in social channels, it could be, in marketing. One of the startups that I'm working with now, or sort of know about now, has actually produced a podcast because they believe that that's the best way for them to attract the people who they want to be their customers. So they're interviewing people in the podcast to then could generate leads for their product. And it's quite smart, actually, because I think that's a good way for them to pull that forward. So I guess I would say to you then, it's, I think, better to focus. So instead of like, all right, we need to be on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and TikTok, and, to rather think like, all right, where are people going to be most interested in hearing what we want to sell them or want to put in front of them? And not only where, which channel, but when, right? Like, I will be very careful about how and when I get in touch with somebody, in terms of time of day of week, right? And a lot of digital marketing tools will let you kind of position things that way. And you can see patterns, in marketing data around, like, wow, people are most receptive to this on Instagram on Tuesdays between 2 and 5 p.m. and on Twitter on Saturdays. Okay, we need to shape our media plan accordingly. And that's all kind of based on some trial and error of those different channels, but also really getting to talk to some prospective customers and say, when would you find this interesting? What is going to make you connect with it? Would you find this on Twitter, or would you find this on TikTok? Like, what? And ask your prospective customers, how and where they'd find the thing that you're putting in front of them. And that remains a continual problem in the kind of the world that I'm in, because the social media platforms continue to change and evolve. Like, hypothetically, TikTok could go away any day now, supposedly, maybe, because of the current Trump administration's movement there. I don't know that it will. Or the next new thing. 2 years ago, nobody was doing anything with TikTok because it didn't even exist, right? And so you have to keep looking at the new and emerging platforms that are out there. Okay, any other questions about this stuff, or did I field your question suitably there? Okay, cool. All right. Well, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to jump over to, we'll do this one first. So this is to me, a fun example of kind of the experience design stuff we're talking about earlier in action. Okay, so sliding boards, kids, it'll probably be a little janky, a little laggy, but here we go. There's no sound, so you're not missing anything. So I totally dig that, whoever built this amazing playground with these amazing sliding boards, none of the kids ever use the sliding boards, because sliding the hill is too much fun, right? So this is sort of a great example of how, an experienced design fail, because really they could have just built the hill with the rubbery stuff on it with no slides, and it would be just as fun, right? But the one that I really wanted to share with you is, just to set this up for a moment, every few years, Microsoft produces kind of future vision videos. So this is one from a couple years ago now, but still interesting to me to see where Microsoft thinks, visual interface design is going out into the world. So I'll let that alone for you. So, here we're kind of seeing that the face mask of this diving suit is projecting, images out into her visual field, which is kind of cool. She's able to use gesture motions to make things happen, which is already happening. Some real-time language translation is happening here. And as it turns out, she's live out diving, and the video stream from what she's doing is coming into this classroom. Here, this group of kids doing stuff with 3D printers based on what they've just seen. Here we've got different tablet devices, sort of an infinite zoom in going on. And I dig that the students here are interacting with the dive while the dive is happening, right? And the newest 5G technologies on our cellular networks are going to make there be enough data to do stuff like that. And Jeeps are still going to be cool. So here we're seeing that technology can be, screens will start to be foldable, and that the latest generation of phones is starting to do that. So this woman is kind of working from wherever around the world, and that's actually going on quite a lot now, with people being able to kind of work from any place around the world, particularly now that most of us are working remotely. So she's able to kind of interact with her team at distance, even though they're all working from different parts of the world. So they're doing some planning together. So now she's taking that work that they were just doing and sort of turning it into a publication and sort of rearranging the design of things, collaborating with her coworkers on this. And now they've just published this out online. And one of these, which may be what we're doing here, there's real-time translation of languages from one language to another going on into people's ears and headsets. I also think we're not far off from having pretty much any piece of glass or any wall being a screen that you can kind of interact with as you move through space. And I think we're also moving to a place where we'll have more common kind of gesture-based interfaces where touches and movements and so forth are common, and you can move things back and forth from these big screens on our walls to tablets and smartphones that we have in our hands. So now this woman is reviewing the proposal of that study that the earlier woman had been sharing with her. There's her bracelet picking out the colors from the stuff that she's seeing in this market. And now calls coming into her bracelet, and we're doing that now. My Apple Watch will ring when the phone rings. But I do kind of like that whole surface of that bracelet turns into a screen. So she's now going into a co-working space, wherever she happens to be traveling, setting up this desktop surface to be instantly with all of the tools that she needs, software and otherwise, to kind of do the work that she wants to do. She doesn't have to bring her own computer anymore. She can just count on being able to do it with computers in this office space. Again, we're seeing kind of pen interfaces, which we can do now, and sort of combination of kind of pen, voice, and gesture-based input to these different screens. Now proposals going out here, and maybe this is coming into her family. The refrigerator is kind of moving back there. The video conference with her dad, who's in a different part of the world. They can just sort of instantly talk with one another, which you can do now. He's got an artificial knee that they can see data all about on real time. And actually at Worldwide Technology, we have some screen surfaces like this that we can use with people these days, where we can collaborate. Now, nobody's using them right now because we're all working from home, but we're able to kind of do collaborative interaction on touchscreen like this together. And remote people to join you for conversations. Another thing you may notice is that we're not really seeing Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel or different specific softwares like that. We're just sort of seeing all of those things blended together into common tools. There's some gesture input and also dimensional holographic displays that can project up out of a given surface. I've seen some prototypes of that stuff. That's pretty cool stuff. These little robots that are going to go off into the ocean to help do the study that they were working on earlier. And you think about, we have drones and other things like this now that can, fly off and fly a circuit and fly back to where they took off from. More stuff coming into her connected bracelet there. And now I think she's just smiling out into the future. So it's been, it's always fun to me. So Microsoft's been doing that for quite some time. And, to me, that's quite fun to see them because, often what happens is that, I think that one came out 2 or 3 years ago now, but some of the stuff that when it first came out was like, oh man, that's so amazing. That's, well, it's kind of stuff that we do now and that's here. The products exist that do some of those things. So I enjoy checking out stuff like that because it gives you a glimpse into kind of where Microsoft and other companies like that think things are going in the near future relative to the interface design stuff that guys like me like to figure out how to do. So that's my show. I know we probably had till the top of the hour, but I want to open it up to any questions y'all may have or comments about the amazing video we just watched or anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up.
I was going to say, can we really quickly do our, Brentwood students have to get out of here in about a minute. But what I was going to say is if we can take a real quick obligatory group pick. I know it seems silly, but I like to do it either on the Zoom anyway. And then maybe we can ask some questions, or I may even call in a few groups and have them share their idea as it relates to maybe experience design. So
Justin, we're going to stay on till 3 today. So we're going to stay on to the end of the call.
Okay, great. Well, let's take that picture anyway. And then after that, we can ask some questions and share some stuff. Sound good?
Cool.
Do you mind, you want to unshare your screen just so I can get the whole group and everyone else can,
yeah, of course.
You can turn your cameras on now that you're not going to be on the spot. See, their cameras do work.
Oh, look.
Look at them. All right. See, there are some smiley faces there. All right. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. Here we go. Here comes the pick. Ready? All right. 3, 2, 1. Thumbs up. Thank you very much, Mr. Coble. All right, cool. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for participating. What I'd like to ask now that I know there are some, I might call in some people if you guys want to volunteer, that'd be great, but love to hear maybe you kind of tell us about, or tell Mr. Coble about what you're working on, and maybe I'm sure he can perhaps give you some advice, especially as it applies to just how things look and how people interact and how people will be using your platforms, your app, your website, whatever it might be. Man, I don't know what. Listen, when we're in person, they won't stop talking. I have to be like, listen, I'm kind of the teacher here. Listen to me.
Everybody smile for Tim Hortons.
Yeah. So all right. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go. I'm gonna go ahead and Abby and Danica. I'm gonna pick on you two because you guys are developing a pretty cool virtual platform. Would you mind sharing kind of what you're working on?
Sure. So right now we are working on designing a website that would support our room design company. That's basically has the goal of like making redecoration, that whole process easier. And so I think our biggest struggle right now is finding a website platform that lets us use like a quiz widget. So I'm not sure if you have any insight on that.
I mean, the stuff that quickly comes to mind is stuff like Wix and Squarespace. Are you guys looking at those kind of platforms? Yeah, okay. I mean, the other thing that you could use for, if it's just kind of proof of concept prototype is use Google Forms, right? And on your Wix or Squarespace thing, just provide a link over to a Google form and have your survey be over there. Some other survey tools that are popular are SurveyMonkey or Get Feedback. And so it may be the case that some of them have components that you can then import into, Wix or Squarespace or some of those, web development things. But, if you're in prototype land, I would just think about maybe starting out with a Google form and publishing that out and then have that be connected to the website with a link.
Thank you.
I really like your comment there too with like the proof of concept. I think that's something that we've talked about before, but it's just, you really just mean like, let's make sure it works and people like it before we spend hours and tons of money on like the official final version, right?
Totally, yeah. And just a quick story about that. A friend of
Oh, he pros. Did everyone freeze?